Welcome, everybody, to the Do You Remember podcast, where nostalgia never gets old. This is the Do You Remember podcast, episode 002. I'm Corey Hoffert.
And I'm Michael Gitter, founder of Do You Remember.
What's up, MG? How are you?
I'm doing well, Corey. How are you?
Yeah, I'm doing great. It's a dreary Sunday here on Memorial Day weekend, but everything's great. I'm chipper. I'm excited about the show.
Yeah, I wish I were in the beach, social distancing with a mask, getting one of those mask tans
Yeah.
I've heard so much about.
It's kind of like the goggles when people go skiing now. It'll be a mask, right? They used to have the tan lines.
The tanning booth with some man in charge.
All right, well, look, let's get started, as we always like to do, with our Magic 8-Ball question.
So I have it right here.
Okay, good. So for this episode's question, we had a call in from Kelly. So let me get that question going right now.
Hi, my name is Kelly, and my question for the Magic 8-Ball is, am I going to meet a masked man anytime soon?
Kelly asked.
A masked man anytime soon. Well, Kelly, let's see what the Magic 8-Ball says. It is decidedly so. It is decidedly so. You will meet a masked man.
Hopefully that's a congratulations for her that she's excited about. But how could you not meet a masked man in this day and time we live in, right?
I mean, she didn't ask whether she was being robbed or something. You know, I'm just like, you'll meet a masked man. Yes, have a gun.
Yeah. I guess there are different types of masks, huh?
I guess so, yeah.
Yeah. All right, so for this week's trivia question, Michael, let me ask you, and you can't cheat, don't go to Google, you don't even need to answer this, kind of for the fans.
Okay.
What is the longest recorded song to ever hit the top of the Billboard charts? Do you know the answer?
I do know the answer.
How would you know the answer?
Is it Stairway to Heaven? I'm trying to think. Is it Meatloaf, Bat Out of Hell? I don't know. It's got to be one of those giant ballads, right?
Yep.
Can you give me a hint of what decade it was?
No.
Okay.
We'll just come up with the answer later in the show. How about that?
Sounds like a plan.
All right. So do you remember this week what made you the happiest?
Okay, so I started to get photographs from friends dating back, I mean, literally to when I was 3 years old. My mom's friends were sending me videos of being on Atlantic Beach, Super 8 or 8 millimeter, jumpy, colors all faded. In the background, I see my dad and I see my mom and my mother's best friends and my aunt, and it just was like so much fun. So I went through, I have this shoebox of photos, and I had these photo albums that were all kind of the plastic ones where you peel back the paper, and I took everything and I organized it. It took me a whole day, primarily because I took those photos and then I photographed them and I started sending them to people I haven't spoken with in a really long time. So I got to regroup with people, you know, inevitably people were like, you're going through your photo box, right? Because every half hour I'd send another photo to somebody I haven't spoken with in a really long time. But it was started because I have a 2-year-old daughter, and I'm told that I look quite a bit like her. And my mom looks quite a bit like her. She looks like my mom or whatever. And so as people are sending me these videos of me saying, doesn't your daughter look just like you? It prompted me to go through this photo box. And it was just so nostalgic. And it's just fun to touch photos. There were Polaroids and Instamatics, and there was a couple of rolls of film that have never gotten processed in there, and there was stuff that got stuck to glass, I guess, was in a picture frame for too long, and it was just really made me happy today. Not today, it really made me happy this week. That was my highlight of the week.
No, of course. I mean, I can only imagine how many memories that brings back, you know, going through old box of photo albums. And it's kind of fun to lose those in a closet. And then when you move or every few years, you rediscover them and they can all be fresh again, you know. What was everybody's response when you sent stuff other than, oh, you're going through an old box? Did you have some memories of people that they forgot about themselves?
we all looked very skinny, and we all had a lot of hair. I think that was kind of the thing. And interestingly enough, it leads you to sort of like a photo hole where you go, okay, let me see what they're doing now. I haven't seen this person in a really long time. Let me try to find them on Facebook or Instagram. And I start going into this sort of, wow, let me do a search. Because, interestingly enough, I'm on Facebook a lot, and Do You Remember has a lot of fans on Facebook, in the millions. So I'm on the platform, but I don't always go to other people's pages. So I started going to other people's pages that I haven't spoken with in a long time. And it was super fun because when I sent some photos to one person I haven't spoken with in a long time, I got a phone number from a 407 area code, which is Florida. And typically, if I don't recognize the number in Florida, it's generally a spam call. But I randomly answered it. And this guy was like, hey, how you doing? And I was like, I didn't know who it was. It turned out to be a very old friend of mine named Robbie Kane. I haven't spoken with in 20 plus years. He called me as if we had just spoken yesterday. Yeah. And he was just really super funny. And so I got a chance to sort of catch up with a lot of people that I haven't caught up with. And that was pretty amazing. It was super fun.
Yeah. No, that's great. I think everybody should do that. And I bet a lot of people have done that during this whole lockdown, stay at home thing,
I just don't know. The interesting thing is that because we live in a world where you take photos, it used to be taking photos was a real chore. Not a chore, but you had to put film in the camera. You had to make sure that it was forwarded to the beginning. You had to make sure that the back was closed or whatever.
And then develop it,
You have to take it to the drugstore or mail it into Kodak or drive through one of those.
How many copies?
Mats.
Do you want to upgrade and you get 2 copies?
Do you want matte? Do you want matte? Do you want shiny? It's that whole thing. And then in the old days, the photos actually had dates printed on them. And the reason I have a funny story is my mother sends some photos that she had found in her box to my brother. And my brother goes, that's not me, Mom, that's Michael. and my mother says, absolutely not. So they get on FaceTime, and on the back of the picture, it said 1962. Well, he wasn't born until 63. It was me at 1 year old. It was just one of those funny things. And it was because there was a date on it. So do you remember, I don't mean to digress, but photos used to come in matte and shiny. They used to come in the early days, they used to have sort of a scalloped edge around them. You could actually order them with a custom scalloped edge. And I found some of those. And then I found some pictures of my grandparents, and I think one of my great-grandparents, although my father wasn't sure. And it was funny. It was like, I don't know if that's my great-grandparents, which means they would be my great-great-grandparents. And I don't know. I kept the pictures, even though it might be some stranger ended up in my photo box.
Somebody will figure that out for you sometime. Well, that's a great week. Good experience for happiness.
It was fun. It was fun. It really was. Next week's podcast has a special musical guest, but because today is Memorial Day, we figured we'd bring him on to say hello to everyone. Mr. God bless the USA himself, Mr. Lee Greenwood.
Hi, this is Lee Greenwood, reminding everybody to listen to me and Corey on Do You Remember next week, talking about all of the things in my career that I might try to remember, and also just the mood of the country. Join us for the podcast, and God bless the USA.
All right, well, let's jump into some of this week's top posts on the Do You Remember Facebook page, which is amazing. So the one, I want to start off with a little comedy from Michelle. I got to read this because her name's very unique. Michelle Merktecresh. And this is really funny. And she said, I just found my old boombox in the garage. Does anyone have 22D batteries I can borrow? Which brings back so many memories. You remember those?
I'll take them out of one of my flashlights, giant Oh my gosh, D batteries. I have something with D batteries in it here. There is a there's a Disney bubble maker that I have. I have to find it, where you push the button and it blows bubbles and it lights up.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
And
Kid's
that uses D batteries. But boom boxes, okay.
Yeah.
Boom boxes. When people
With
used
D
to carry them over
batteries.
their shoulder, they were like suitcases, remember?
Oh, of course. It
Yeah.
was hip. I mean, it was cool to have, you know?
Yeah. It reminds me actually of something. I'll tell a quick story. So in the early, I guess, 80s or 70s, maybe, they used to roller skate in Central Park. And they're still doing it to this day. And it happens every Sunday. And I did a little research on it a few days ago for a story that we're writing on Do You Remember? And they used to, just to bring you up to current times, they've actually become a corporation, a nonprofit 501c3. They collect donations and they actually are like a real legit operation. But in the past, they used to skate in Central Park after coming home from this disco called the Roxy, which was like a disco skating rink. And it was super popular back in the day. And you would go and they would bring a bunch of boom boxes, and they would put the boom boxes in the center of this closed street that was only closed on Sundays. And they would put it in the closed street, and they would put some cones, and then people would skate around these in an oval. And the way that they got the music to work, because you couldn't synchronize everything, is they put it to a radio station. I think it was, I'm going to make it up, I think it's WBLS or something, WKTU, one of those. Anyways, great disco stuff. And they used to turn all the boom boxes onto the same station, and then they would dance to the music from the radio on like 20 boom boxes that were positioned in the center of this. And it was actually quite fun. And it still exists. As I say, they're a legitimate non-for-profit right at the moment, and they still dance. So every time I hear boom boxes, and the funny thing is that because this radio station knew what was going on, they would always play music that the people would dance to, because there would be hundreds and hundreds of people not dancing, but there would be hundreds of people gathering around, sort of dancing in place. And and then the skaters were in the middle, and then the boom boxes were in the middle of that. And, you know, I think there was alcohol involved. There probably still is.
Oh, I'm sure not. No way. Yeah.
But it's a slice of New York. And, you know, roller skating to me is such a nostalgic thing to begin with. And I don't know, they wore like big, giant, baggy pants and these flowy things, and some of them now have advertisements that literally carry around a sign saying this billboard available for rent, and like charge people or something. But disco skating at the Roxy, followed by Sunday in Central Park with boom boxes and WKTU music playing. It just makes me have goosebumps.
That's super cool. Yeah.
Brings me back to a super great place, especially with a weekend like this, which if it were not rainy and cold and we're not stuck in the house because of coronavirus, we'd be out there. So if it was a beautiful sunny day and a pandemic wasn't happening, we would probably be watching them in Central Park right now. So.
Yeah, well, that's why we need memories, right? For time like this. This is why Do You Remember exists, exactly. What I remember when I saw that post, it hit me so funny, because first, like you're talking about, boom boxes are amazing. But what struck me most about it was the stupid batteries. I mean, I remember having so many different gadgets, or boom boxes in particular. Like maybe it's winter season, you don't use the boom box, right? Or your stereo. Then you go to do it later and you open up and it won't work. And then you open up the battery thing and then it all like melted and welded and rusted together, because it got old and batteries were such a pain.
My grandfather actually was able to make that work again. He would take like a toothbrush, I think, on an extender, and he would get in there to this. There was a coil at one point. There's a coil on it.
That's what holds the batteries,
Yeah, whatever. And he would take the coil and he would unscrew it and he would clean it meticulously and then put it all back together and then get that. Well, mostly was that giant flashlight that we were just talking about that he would get working again after all that battery acid melted out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, another top post. This is a little more serious. I really like it, though. I think a lot of people have a lot to say about it. It's somewhat controversial. It was posted by Fred Scaboto, and he's asking, do you think your childhood, and you're talking about your 2-year-old now, like, do you think your childhood was better before we had all this distracting social media and cell phones in particular?
Because Do You Remember is my baby, I would normally say, sure, it was a more innocent time when we went outside and we did bicycle riding and saw our friends, and today's kids are inside doing their video games and stuff. But I do think that from a technological standpoint, it's interesting to be alive during this time where you could find out anything that you want to find out without having to go to the library and going through the Dewey Decimal System and trying to figure out the answer to something that maybe a curious kid like me, who might have lived during this time, would have really, I think, benefited from. So I think while the quick answer is yes, the innocent time before everyone was looking at their phones is the first thing that comes to mind. I actually think technology is kind of a cool thing. And even though we're kind of merging into becoming cyborgs, something I heard Elon Musk say, we're becoming cyborgs. We use our technology. And then after he said it, the commercial that came on was this device that you put on your body. It looked like a big disc, and it could tell you how much insulin you needed and whatever. And all of a sudden I realized we are becoming cyborgs. So I enjoyed my childhood. I also enjoyed my college years. I think that no matter what school you went to in college, it could have been the most horrible city for everyone who lives there, but because you went to college there, it was super great. Everyone has good memories of that time. So the long answer to the short question is, I think it's cool to be alive right now.
Yeah. I've heard a lot of people analyze this similar question, and I think people say throughout history this would be the time people would pick, because even though we hear all kinds of crazy things in the news and see it on TV, like, it is relatively safe and advanced and all of this. But I think, like, I embrace technology and I have business in technology and everything, but it's definitely super distracting. Like, I was thinking, like, even to like go and say message a friend or call my mom, whatever it is, I'll end up picking up the phone and I end up in a totally different direction doing something totally different because there's a notification about a news thing, or a message from somebody on social or whatever it is. And so we get lost all the time. So it takes a little discipline. But I think if people have that, obviously it's empowered society in many ways, but I just think it's so distracting, and there's ways to kind of separate that from people's lives. And I know every parent tries to, but also, like, there comes a point, like, you can see this out at restaurants or in public. It's sometimes parents just give in and say, screw it, because the kid in public is antsy and wanting to move around, and they just hand them the phone or the tablet and say, here, watch YouTube,
Right. I mean, technology is interesting because there was a book called Time Wars. It's very hard to find right now, by a guy named Jeremy Rifkin. And Jeremy analyzes how certain things took a certain amount of time. And he analyzed, clocks in the public squares of different cities and different rural areas, and how time is not important to rural Africa as it might be to Berlin, Germany. And so it's just a very interesting analysis of time. But we actually lived through the beginning and the end of the fax machine. I mean, if you think about how that whole technology came and went, it was so revolutionary, and then it went. While this was all happening, and the fax machines were hot, this is when this book came out. And he said, when you had a call with somebody from New York, let's say, to San Francisco or Los Angeles, and if you said, send it to me immediately, the expectation was 7 business days. 7 business days. Yeah. Send it to me immediately meant 7 business days. And then when the fax machine came around, send it to me immediately was literally like, how fast is your dial-up on the fax? Yeah. And how fast can you throw it into the machine? And now, of course, with email and everything else, it's just instantaneous.
Yeah.
So the idea of time has shifted from literally an entire generation. I went to school. I went to college starting in '79. I bought a computer, the first IBM, the IBM PC-1, with 2 double density disk drives, 64K of RAM, and it was $3,495. I ended up building a company making computer accessories for that product, and that lasted for a number of years. But after I came up with that computer, or I bought that computer, before I even finished paying it off, watches by Seiko had twice the memory of this computer for 30, and they were giving them away when you bought a printer, because Seiko and Epson were the same company. So you would buy a printer, you get a watch that had more capacity. So I think it's interesting that we're the generation that went from having no computers and no fax machines to fax machines being almost an antiquity, certainly not used anymore. Although I did, when I was researching sending these photos to people and I was looking for email addresses to send photos, half of them had fax machines. I haven't spoken with them in so long. It's like fax. I'm like,
anyway. Those are out of order now.
Yeah, certainly.
Funny. Well, to finish off our top post of the week is another funny one, also from Michelle Merck de Crace, which I just love this. So I'm just going to read it.
Michelle's got some super posts going on, huh?
She had 2 heavy hitters this week. So listen to this. This is really funny. It's going to tickle you. So she says, and I got to read it. So due to the ongoing crisis, Sweet Caroline the song is now banned from use. There will be no touching hands, reaching out, touching me, touching you.
That's funny.
Not only is that good, but then David Bickford had an amazing comment, and he said, and no more, quote, let's get it on. Unless you're talking about PPE.
It's like I listened to this song the other day called My Corona from the My Sharona song. I'm like,
oh my God, yeah, that totally makes sense. All right, so before we have a surprise, before this quick break, in our Bring It Back segment, Michael, what do you got on the list for this week that you would like to bring it back?
Disco. I would like to bring back disco.
Oh my, you're going to have to explain this because I think there's a lot of people who are going to say no. So justify it, please.
Okay, so I looked up Rolling Stone's top 10 disco songs, right? I'm going to just name a few of them. Bee Gees, Staying Alive. Gloria Gaynor, I Will Survive. Donna Summer, I Feel Love. Donna Summer, Last Dance. The Tramps, Disco Inferno. Bee Gees, You Should Be Dancing. Thelma Houston. I was going to say Thelma and Louise. Thelma Houston, Don't Leave Me This Way. And Night Fever and Le Freak by Chic. If those songs you remember, you'd be smiling right now. You'd be thinking about them. You'd be feeling good about them. It was a happy time. I listened to DJ Nice on Instagram. We stand in the house and we put it on a speaker and we dance like silly dancing. I think it's time to bring disco back.
Okay, look, you justified that very well with just a few of those songs. So everybody's all in. All right, that's awesome. I can't wait to hear what it is next week. All right, so look, right after this quick break, we're going to be back. But stay tuned. We got a little special guest to help us with this week's trivia question.
Perfect.
Okay, so we're going to break. That's going to cut. We're going to put in Dawn's interview. And It's really good. Hey, is your phone on or is that the notifications on your computer?
It's my computer.
All
my
right.
phone is on silent.
We'll figure out next time how to play with that. Nothing to do now.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, so
is this going through okay? Does this feel like a good interview? Like, is it too
it's great.
long or what?
I'm just going to talk real quick about Dawn and where people can get all of his new music. Well, not his new music, but his new way to get his old music. and then I'm going to ask you about your favorite Dawn memory or song.
Okay, so we've already done the Dawn interview now, and we're coming back after
We're
the Dawn
coming back.
interview.
Yeah, exactly.
So why don't we just start with like singing like something like "Drove my Chevy to the left," like as if we listened to it, right?
Yeah.
Shouldn't we? Like it's almost like an outro.
I would love it if you did anything, because it'll be after a break, whether there's a commercial or not, there won't be. So like after a break, you can do anything. You can start, the camera will be on you, the video will be.
Okay.
And then I'll just interrupt you and promote the streaming of the songs.
Okay.
And then I'm going to ask you if you had a favorite memory.
A favorite memory of Dawn?
Of Dawn, yeah, or a song or whatever. And
Okay.
And then I'm going to tell the audience where they can submit their.
How long was the song? 8 minutes, right?
Yeah, 8 minutes and 41 seconds or something.
Okay.
And then I'm going to tell the audience where they can submit a 8-ball question for next week, and then we'll do an outro and get out of here.
Okay.
So if you want to, we can pause for a second, and then you can start singing or whatever it is, and then I'll interrupt you after your like one line of singing. Yeah.
Maybe do another Magic 8-ball. Was that great or what? Yes. No, I'm not going to do that. One 8-ball question's enough.
Okay. All right, on you.
Bye, bye, Miss American Pie. You got to love that song, right? You got to just love Don. He's terrific.
Amazing. Totally terrific. And everybody, go check out the 178 songs from 11 different items from Dawn with the new Time Life partnership. It's on any digital streaming service that you prefer. And that's going to be endless music for this coming summer. So, Michael, speaking of Dawn, do you have a favorite memory of him or his music?
I just have one strong memory. I don't know if it was my favorite because I'm not much into working out, but I used to run an 8-minute mile, and back in the day, and I'd put that song on my Sony Walkman, and or whatever my tape thing was, and I would listen to it, and by the time the song was over, I ran my mile. So that's my memory.
That's amazing. So in a way, you might have some negative feeling about it, because if you're running an 8-minute mile,
it's like I'm almost done. Drove that Chevy. Let's keep going.
Well, there must be some pain involved too, because that's amazing. 8-minute mile is not so easy, man. Good for you.
Well, I was high school. It was.
Yeah, but miles were still just as long then as they are now. So
yeah, but the body was able to do it a lot better than it would now. So
now we started off this episode with a trivia question about which song hit the top of Billboard charts. It was the longest recorded song. And so we thought to answer this week's trivia question, we'd bring on a special guest. Welcome, Mr. Don McLean. The one, the only.
Hey.
Well, you were the answer to the, coincidentally, the answer to the trivia question this week.
Here I am.
Yeah, thanks for taking the time to hang out with Do You Remember again, the place for nostalgia where nostalgia never gets old. Last time we were together, Dawn, I think we had an audience size of like 5 million, and we hear from you because your stuff comes up all the time on our site and Facebook page.
Wow, I'm so glad. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for taking the time.
No, I'm delighted to be on your show, and I'm delighted to talk about the past. I love the past, especially the music in the 50s and 60s.
Yeah.
70s, kind of. And then I kind of, once it gets to be disco, I kind of bail out,
Okay, so that's when you tune out.
And I have no idea what's going on now. None.
Really?
I admit it. I'm not one of those old guys that says, "Oh yes, I love, the chain smokers or something."
Yeah. Okay, yeah. So you're not keeping up with the new stuff. You're staying with old trusty. I mean, if you like something, why change it, right?
Well, everything seems the same to me. Maybe it's because I can't hear as well as I used to, but it doesn't seem like. Bob Dylan came out with a song, something about I'm full of something or other. I can't remember. It was a new song that he came out with after the Murder Most Foul. And I thought those were great lyrics that he wrote. And it was a nice thing to see great lyrics. And so, it still can happen,
How do you reference yourself? Do you call yourself a singer, a songwriter, a performer?
Reference myself.
Yeah.
What do I call myself? Yeah. Well, I'm a singer-songwriter because, first of all, I'm a singer.
Yeah.
And secondly, I'm a songwriter. But so I don't take the singing part casually,
Yeah.
I mean, I've sung songs like Crying and Since I Don't Have You, and I've sung many songs that'll be on these 11 albums that are going up in these 173 tracks. Probably a third of those will be songs that I did not write. And so I'm a singer first and then a songwriter. But I like the word songster. I think Mance Lipscomb used to call himself a songster. I think I'm kind of a songster. I sing the American Song Bag, but I wrote some songs that people know and continue to add to that, as well.
Yeah, songster, super cool. And just as you referenced, we're celebrating this month for the first time ever the release of, like you said, 173 songs of yours from 11 different albums, which is an amazing collection. So everybody can now stream those on their favorite digital platform. It's part of a new partnership with New Time Life. So everybody needs to check that out. And we'll link that on the Do You Remember Facebook page, website, and email. So you can all check that out and hear all of Don's stuff.
Well, this is a terrific thing. I had an album which hadn't been released of songs by other people, songs that my band and I would do. And we were in the studio cutting the last album of my own songs, which was called Botanical Gardens. And we made the second album while we were there, and it sat there.
Yeah.
So I said to my folks in Nashville who represent me, I said, let's try to find a record company. So they went to Warner Brothers, and we casually began. They wanted the album. So we began talking about wanting to put these other albums up on these streaming platforms. And they said, we do that, and we'd like to do that for you. And we said, thank God, because this is hard to do.
Yeah.
You got to have a reference number for every one of these tracks. And so, by golly, they opened up this YouTube channel, a Don McLean YouTube channel. And we've got a lot of videos on that now, stuff where I'm talking about how I play guitar and a Martin guitar thing that I did, and now there's a banjo thing that's going to go up. I just had to do this because I'm the only person left that knows how to play these styles on the folk banjo. Most of the old guys that I knew are dead. So I figured I'd get that out there in case somebody ever wants to use that instrument. And then they are going to upload 11 albums and 173 tracks on every streaming platform. And I'm going to make a lot of money. So, I'm thrilled.
Yeah, it's spectacular. Hey, everybody will take that. Life's work deserves some
I've been
payoff.
staying home and making money. I can't believe it.
Hey, from this 2020 lockdown quarantine fiasco we've all been going through, are you surprised at something good that came out of it? Like me, for instance, and preparing yesterday to speak with you, I was thinking, the last 2 months, I've listened to more music than I had in 10 years. Is there something delightful that came from your time at home?
Well, I was saying that I've been, getting a lot of exercise lately. I've been going from the bed to the media room, watching Columbo.
Okay.
And then I do that all afternoon, and then watch some Gunsmoke. And then I get over and I have a martini or two, get back to the media room and see what's happened to the stock market, and then go back into the bedroom, take a nap. And so, I'm in terrific condition because of that. All my organs are well rested now.
Yeah.
I'm not running around too much, but my legs don't work too well. That's the only problem.
Well, I think your next project should be on how to successfully survive a quarantine, because that sounds like the perfect daily routine.
Yeah, it is, and I have all kinds of wonderful people around me delivering food from all the restaurants. So I put on way too much weight. I got to start losing weight.
Yeah.
But that's always been a tough thing for me. Ever since I was a kid, I'm always up and down. But now I'm up.
Hey, putting on weight is a survival skill, so you should take that as a badge of honor.
Yes, and I found a cool way. I won't wear a mask. I wear a Western bandana.
Cool.
So I look like one of the Western guys robbing a bank, Because I can't do the medical thing. I don't like medical stuff.
Yeah.
I'm in surgical gloves and medical. I mean, everybody needs to do this, and I'm glad they're doing it. But for me, I got to go Western, so that's what I'm doing there.
It's good to do something to protect ourselves. That's for sure. Whatever it may be.
Yes, we need to protect ourselves. We do,
Yeah.
and we don't know what's happening. But one thing we do know is that we don't know anything. This is so different.
Yeah.
And we just don't know. And I read a lot of stuff by economists and stuff and things like that. And one bank will say this is going to happen, and and the other bank will say the other thing is going to happen. So the consensus is that there's complete confusion amongst experts.
Yeah.
And that goes across the board.
Yeah.
But we're Americans. We'll figure it out. We'll be all right. We always have been, and we always will be.
It's the resilient nature, and that's why music is always important, honestly, to help feel that vibe and spur people on. So we have millions of audience members in Do You Remember, most of whom love and adore you, and so we got a lot of submitted questions, and so I'd love to go over some of those real quick with you. So one we got, which I really liked, was, from all the colleagues that you worked with, performed with, or saw perform, is there a hidden gem of somebody you thought should have been bigger, or maybe didn't break out as much as you respected them?
Oh yes. Delbert McClinton.
Okay.
And another one named Marcia Ball.
Yeah.
They, in their heyday, when they are amazing songwriters and amazing performers. And I think they have the same management, which may be why they never made it. I don't know. But they are tremendous performers and singers and songwriters. You hear them once and you'll remember a bunch of their songs. I still like that Delbert McClinton song, I Got to Get It Worked On.
Yeah.
He broke up with his girl, and he says, I got to get, I'm in bad shape, so I got to get it worked on. Oh, he's amazing.
Yeah. No, that's cool. And so you referenced this earlier. For in our large group, we often break up a lot of our stuff into decades because people have a special time they love or hate. So from the 60s to the 50s to the 70s, the 80s, and so forth. What is your favorite decade?
Well, I love the 30s, 40s, 50s, and 60s.
Okay.
I'm especially in love with the 1930s.
Yeah.
I love black and white movies. I love early Western movies with no music.
Okay.
Just the hard-bitten guys that used to ride, and the sounds of the horses, and the oh God, I love that stuff.
Yeah.
I love the 30s music, a lot of it. I love Bessie Smith. I love Django Reinhardt. I love, and then when I get into the 40s, everything quickly became very sophisticated. Mm-hmm. Because, the dawn of sound in movies was 1929. So by 1931, they were making amazing outdoor Western movies. And by 1938, you had The Wizard of Oz, Gone with the Wind, all these masterpieces that will never be topped. In 8 short years, they managed to get to Technicolor and doing all that's amazing. Well, then in the 40s, you get the sophistication starts to come in. Mm-hmm. So as we have World War II, we have a lot of German immigrants that came to the United States who ended up being great cinematographers and filmmakers and contributed to this whole film noir, which the Germans were, of course, a big influence on Hitchcock. And the music, the popular music, started to become very beautiful and sophisticated, gorgeous songs in the 40s. And this is when you had Bing Crosby and Sinatra and Fred Astaire and all the great stylists, in their first phase. And then the 50s kind of had a break in the early 50s when Sinatra was down the tubes. And it was open season, and in crept the Weavers. And so we had folk music on the charts for the first time ever. And people like Johnny Ray, who was a kind of a freaky singer, but a tremendous singer, great voice, great actor, and a precursor to Elvis, And one of the things that people forget is that William Boyd, Hopalong Cassidy, was one of the biggest sensations in America in the late 40s, early 1950s. It's almost like Elvis Presley, and people don't ever talk about it, but he was like a god. And he would go and open up at the Daily News. They would have a comic strip in 1950. There'd be 300,000 people that would come to the Daily News. It was unbelievable.
Yeah.
So there was this idea of mass adulation of somebody before Elvis, and they grew a little older, and then Elvis came along, and they fell in love with him.
Yeah.
And, you had the teenage thing was really, the word teenager is a new word. They never used that word before. It was because of the kids who were from World War II, born when the guys came back from the war and started, knocking out the kids. And by 1956, there were 10, 11 like I was.
Yeah.
And Elvis comes along. It's a teenage power group. And everything served us. It was magic.
Yeah.
Because we had our own music, we had our own way of dressing, we had our everything.
Yeah.
And we weren't really set up to be like mom and dad, even though it seemed like it, because the music was going to take us down another path. And sure enough, after the Kennedy assassination in the 60s, all hell broke loose. Then everybody was doing their own thing, and the studio system sort of splintered. And it's really tough, because in my day, you had to produce the record, write the songs, make the album, do everything yourself. And back in the old days, you had a record producer, which I had, but then you had the vocalist, and then you had the producers, the songwriters who would come and give the vocalist the songs. They would sit and pick, and then you had an arranger who would come in, a Gordon Jenkins or whatever. So each person had their specialty. When I made my albums, I had to do everything. I had to tell them how the song was arranged.
Yeah.
I had to write the song. I had to sing the song.
Yeah.
I had to fight with everybody. And I'm not alone. Everybody had to go through this.
Yeah.
Because this was the new way of doing things in the late 60s, early 70s. So those decades are my favorite.
Well, and that turned you into a songster because you did have to exert that control. I see, a lot of music the last 20 years, they have entire teams make one song, and the person that we know who sings that song really didn't have any input on it. They're just the one that we see. And that's where I think the arts, not with everybody, but a lot of people is lost.
I don't hear songs being written anymore. So that's my problem. We have a different kind of musical entertainment that I do. It's not for me. I don't understand it. It's not meant for me. But I think what I get from it is that it's more of a rhythm thing. It's more of a heavy-duty rhythm thing with, repetitive hooks, little hooks, but they're not even great hooks. They're just like a couple of things said over and over. And so I think what's happened is that the audience has grown up on this stuff, and rap music too, which is a version of that. And they've kind of lowered their standards as to what to expect. So, they're yearning for this stuff that they heard before, but that's not happening.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that ever will happen. I had a great producer friend of mine named Joel Dorn, and he made 200 records. Jazz records were the greatest jazz people ever. We made 3 records together. He produced Killing Me Softly and the Roberta Flack albums, among many. He said, everybody's waiting for things to come back. They ain't coming back. The big bands aren't coming back.
Yeah.
They had their time. The singer-songwriters that extended through the 60s to the early 70s, they're not coming back.
Yeah.
The English groups, the English thing, it's not happening again.
Yeah.
Something's happening now, and it's a question of whether you like it or not, but that's what's happening.
Yeah. So, hey, one question that 4 people asked is, Don, do you sing in the shower? Everybody's got to know.
I sing all over the house. I'm not singing too well right now because I have terrible allergies and my nose is stuffed up.
Yeah.
And I get, dry throat and everything.
Yeah.
But I'm always singing, and I'm always testing out my notes to see if I have them,
Yeah.
because you got to be able to throw your fastball, whenever you sing. Right now I couldn't sing really high notes, but yeah, I sing all the time.
What if in the biopic of your life, who do you want to play you?
Well, I know some of my favorite actors, but they wouldn't be any good for me. I mean, Christian Bale would be great to play me, but he wouldn't really fit me. But I think he's one of the greatest actors in the world.
It's amazing, yeah.
I like Johnny Depp a whole lot. Poor guy has been really put through the mill with all this bullshit.
Yeah.
But he's a terrific actor, and there are a lot of other good ones. But Christian is the one for me. I think he's highly disciplined, and he can do anything.
Yeah, he's proven that for sure, over and again. Yeah.
Yes.
All right, so if you were going to be deserted for 1 year and you could only listen to one album, what album would it be?
God, if I say one thing, I'm going to wish I said 5 other things.
Okay, you can say 2. How about that? Is that okay?
Well, 2 albums. Sinatra Basie,
Okay.
which was made in 1962. The original album, I don't like the CD. They fooled around with it, and they changed the EQ, and they completely screwed it up, which they do sometimes. That's something for your listeners to think about. The original vinyl of an album, if you can get let's say you want a Beatles record. If you get an album of old stock, that was released in 1967, you're going to hear exactly what the Beatles approved.
Yeah.
That's the sound. If you get a CD, they're going to have screwed around with it. And if you A-B those two, you're going to hear a big difference.
Yeah.
And if they use the track from the CD to make the new vinyl, it's going to be different from the original vinyl.
Yeah.
So it's something to think about if you're a purist,
Yeah.
So I like the way it sounded when it came out. Magic. As far as a second record, I think the Chirping Crickets would be the one I would want. That was the album. Everything in my life goes back to when I was 15 or younger.
Yeah.
Everything that matters to me is when I was in my mid-teens backwards. So I'd rather hear Danny and the Juniors than Bob Dylan.
Okay.
I'd rather hear the Everly Brothers than the Beatles.
Okay.
Oh, I love the Beatles, and I love Bob Dylan, and I love the Stones a lot,
Yeah.
But I'd rather hear, Little Richard or someone like that rather than the Stones. Mm-hmm. It's like food, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's a different taste, but it's kind of the same, from the same restaurant. But I prefer that.
So, do you have a most prized possession?
Yes, I have the belt buckle that was owned by and used in every movie that the greatest Western star in the world ever starred in, whose name was Buck Jones.
Yeah.
And I have his Steerhead belt buckle, which is gold with ruby eyes.
Yeah, wow.
And all those movies from the early 1930s, he wears that in every single one of them.
That is amazing. That's a cool one for sure. I like that.
He probably died with it on because he burned up in the Boston Coconut Grove fire in 1941.
Yeah.
And he's the biggest legend among old time Western film freaks like I am.
Yeah.
I have his belt buckle.
So we're going to make sure that everybody in the Do You Remember community knows that they can go to their favorite digital streaming service and download and listen to, 11 albums of yours. Other than that, is there anything that you would ask of the large global Do You Remember community? Is there something you want them to do for you or for themselves?
Well, I would ask and hope that people will find new songs of mine that'll be good to them, because music is your best friend. I mean, my songs have been friends to people for 50 years. If taken them through their lives and their children through their lives. It's something you go back to. You know, flowers fade and people die and houses burn down and, you know, pandemics come, but there's always American Pie. There's always a day in the life. There's always satisfaction. Yeah. There's always don't be cruel. Yeah. You know, these things are like monuments. They're like the Rocky Mountains. Yeah. So I would hope that people will find more songs of mine that are friends to them, and that they use to make themselves feel better.
Wow, that's amazing answer. Music is your friend, and I love that quote. Thank you so much, Don. Could we bother you to play us out with a song?
Sure. Well, I'll play you out with. Can I sing anything I want? Anything
you want. The audience with Do You Remember? We will love anything.
I want to sing this, right? When I walk through that door, baby, be polite. You gonna make me sore if you don't greet me right. Don't you ever kiss me once, kiss me twice. Treat me nice. I know that you've been told it's not fair to tease, but if you come on cold, I'm really gonna freeze. If you don't want me to be cold as ice, treat me nice. Or make me feel at home if you really care. Scratch my back and run your pretty fingers through my hair. Oh, well, you know I'm gonna be your slave if you ask me to. But if you don't behave, I'll walk right out on you. If you want my love and take my advice, treat me nice. Treat me nice. Treat me nice.
Ladies and gentlemen, that is the American songster himself, Mr. Don McLean. Thank you so much, sir, for spending time with us.
My pleasure.
One favor. Could we ask you to say just a simple line? Really, the community is huge and love and adores you. And if you could say just anything to the Do You Remember people, like, hey, everyone at Do You Remember, thanks for, thanks all of you to being part of the Do You Remember community. Something like that.
Thank you, everybody, for being part of the Do You Remember community. I am a big fan of this show. I am a part of the Do You Remember community, and I hope you continue to remember me, and I hope you continue to remember all of your wonderful songs and great memories from our past. We can't let that go because the past determines the future. And thank you for watching.
Oh my gosh. Big hug from far away, Don. Thank you so much.
Nice talking to you.
All right, so everybody, for next week's Magic 8-Ball question, feel free to submit any that you have. You can send it to email at info@doyouremember.com, or you can obviously send a message on the Do You Remember Facebook page, and we'll try and get that in like we did Kelly's this week. And also, this is a new podcast. I know we have like almost 15 million of you as part of our community, but the podcast is new, so we appreciate you listening. We appreciate you sharing it with your friends. Leave comments, subscribe, anything to help us get the word out there so we can get more and more feedback on how we can make this better.
Tell people about it. Join.
Yeah, everything. And so we'll see you again next week on the Do You Remember podcast, where nostalgia never gets old.
Thanks for watching.
Bye, everybody.
Take care.